Class 3 of our course will turn our attention to the many aspects of teaching and learning in higher education. This first presentation, Learning Styles and Strategies for the Higher Education Student, begins our journey into the many characteristics and attributes of teaching and learning that you will encounter as a college or university faculty member. At its conclusion, you should have become more aware of the values of these various learning strategies and what they can provide to your classroom. So let's get started. I've used this cartoon a couple of times in some of my other classes, and it really brings home to me the expectations that both students and instructors have when it comes to teaching in the classroom. Certainly not everyone learns the same way. In fact, there's a stunning variety of learning styles. Students receive and process information in many different ways. Some by seeing and hearing, others by reflecting and acting, others by reasoning logically and intuitively, and still others by analysis and visualization. Similarly, our teaching methods also vary among faculty. Some college instructors like to lecture, others demonstrate or lead students to self-discovery or focus on principles and real-world applications. Finally, some faculty members emphasize memory, while others prefer a level of understanding. To illustrate this, I want you to complete the Index of Learning Styles, an online learning styles inventory based on a model formulated by Richard Felder and Linda Silverman. A link to the inventory is shown on this slide, and it's also available in your course syllabus. So if you would at this time, pause the presentation, take the inventory, get your results, and then come back to the presentation and we'll continue. Now that you've completed your own inventory, let's consider your results. Felder and Wilson's inventory produces a graph that extends from one side of a continuum to the other. Using your own results, a score near the middle of the graph represents a relatively weak preference within that particular learning dimension. For example, a score near the middle of the active reflective graph indicates that the learner prefers active learning in some situations and reflective learning in others. On the other hand, a score far to the left or right represents a strong preference for one learning style over the other. The first of four graphs examines active versus reflective learners. Active learners tend to retain and understand information best by doing something active with it, discussing or applying it or explaining it to others. Reflective learners prefer to think about it quietly first. Sensitive learners on the second graph tend to like learning facts and prefer solving problems by well-established methods. They tend to be patient with details and good at memorizing facts and doing hands-on work. And they typically do not like courses that have no apparent connection to the real world. Intuitive learners, on the other hand, prefer discovering possibilities and relationships. They are better at grasping new concepts and are more comfortable with abstractions and mathematical formulas. On the third line, visual learners remember best what they see: pictures, diagrams, flowcharts, timelines, films, and demonstrations. Verbal learners get more out of words, written and spoken explanations. Well, everyone learns more when information is presented both visually and verbally. In many college classes, students are exposed mainly to lectures and written material on chalkboards or in textbooks and handouts. Most college-level learners are visual learners, which means that most students do not get nearly as much out of your presentations as they would if more visual presentation media were used in class. This is a consideration for every faculty. And finally, on the bottom graph, sequential learners increase their level of knowledge in steps that flow logically from the first to the next. They appreciate a predictable path when seeking solutions. And global learners, at the other extreme, tend to absorb material randomly, without necessarily seeing connections right off, and then suddenly getting it. The light bulb comes on. They can solve complex problems quickly, or put things together in novel ways once they have grasped the big picture, but they may have difficulty explaining exactly how they did it. When mismatches exist between learning styles of your students and the teaching style of the professor, something's going to have to give. Depending on the ends of the continuum, some students may become bored and inattentive in class. Others may become overwhelmed, doing poorly on tests, becoming discouraged with the courses, the curriculum, and even themselves. And in some cases, changing their major or leaving school altogether. Higher education faculty are usually hired because of their expertise and success in their academic disciplines. They're accomplished engineers or well-thought-of business leaders. Whether they may be able to teach undergrad or graduate students is another matter entirely. Professors confronted by low test scores, unresponsive or hostile classes, poor attendance and dropouts, know that something is not working. They may become overly critical of their students or wonder if their students are in the right profession. In a properly balanced course, all students will be taught partly in the manner they prefer. To overcome these problems, either the professor must balance those delivery methods or the learner must be prepared to adjust. So let's discuss some ways that the instructor and the student can adjust to these inconsistencies in learning styles. We're going to look at each of these slides from the perspective of both the student and the instructor. If you are an active learner in a class that allows little or no class time for discussion or problem-solving activities, in other words, you're an active learner, you should try to compensate for these shortcomings when you study. Study in a group in which the members take turns explaining different topics to each other. Work with others to guess what you will be asked on the next test and figure out how you will answer. You will always retain information better if you find ways to do something with it. If you are a reflective learner in a class that allows little or no class time for thinking about new information, you should try to compensate for this when you study. Don't simply read or memorize the material. Stop periodically to review what you have read and to think of possible questions or applications. You might find it helpful to write short summaries of reading or class notes in your own words. Doing so may take extra time, but will enable you to retain the material more effectively. As an instructor, you should allow additional class time for thinking and reflection. That may go against your strengths as a learner, but again, you're addressing some of the other learners' learning styles in your class. Sensitive learners remember and understand information best if they can see how it's going to connect to the real world. If you are in a class where most of the material is taught abstractly or theoretically, you're going to have difficulty. Ask your instructor for specific examples of concepts and procedures, and find out how these concepts apply in the practice. As an instructor, you should provide enough specifics and try to find some in your course text or other reference, or let your students brainstorm with class or friends. Many college lecture classes are aimed at intuitors. However, if you are an intuitor and you happen to be in a class that deals primarily with memorization or rote substitution like in formulas, you may have trouble with boredom, and you need to be alert to that. Ask your instructor for interpretations or theories that link the facts that are being discussed. or try to find those connections yourself. You may also be prone to careless mistakes on tests because you're simply too impatient with the details and don't like repetition. As an instructor, one of the tools that you can use is to be on watch for students who do not seem to be engaged in your classroom. And when you set up your times for exams and quizzes, do not allow students to turn in their papers early. Give them, force them, if you will, to read the entire questions and to check their answers and results before they turn in their work. If you are a visual learner, try to find diagrams, sketches, schematics, photographs, flowcharts, or any other visual representation of your course material. Ask the instructor to help you find those kinds of resources. Consult reference books, or go to the library to see if there's any videotapes or CD-ROMs of the course material that you're covering. Prepare concept maps by listing key points, enclosing them in boxes or circles, and drawing lines with arrows between these concepts to show connections. Color code your notes with a highlighter so that everything relating to one topic is the same color. For the instructor, look to incorporate these kinds of visual-based materials into your course, or better yet, create your own visual-based materials. And we're going to explore ways in which you can do that in an upcoming lesson. For the verbal learner, write summaries or outlines of course materials in your own words. Working in groups can be particularly effective for you, as you gain an understanding of material by hearing your fellow classmates' explanation, and you'll learn even more when you do the explaining. For the instructor, verbal information is well presented using podcasts, narrated PowerPoint presentations like this one, or the development of your own video clips. Consider all of those as tools to help the verbal learner. Most college courses are taught in a sequential manner. However, if you are a sequential learner and you have an instructor who jumps around from topic to topic or skips steps, you may have difficulty following and remembering. Ask your instructor to fill in the skipped steps, or fill them in yourself by consulting some additional references. When you are studying, take the time to outline the lecture materials for yourself in a logical order. In the long run, doing so will save you time. You might also try to strengthen your global thinking skills by relating each new topic you study to things that you already know. The more you can do, the deeper your understanding of the topic is likely to be. For the instructor, this is an opportunity for you to provide study guides and worksheets to your students that will help them follow along with you in your class and to help them construct new knowledge. If you are a global learner, it can be helpful for you to realize that you need to know the big picture of a subject before you can master its details. If your instructor plunges directly into new topics without bothering to explain how they relate to what you already know, it can cause problems for you. Fortunately, there are steps you can take that may help you get the picture more rapidly. Before you begin to study the first section of a chapter in a text, skim through the entire chapter to get an overview. Doing so may be a little time-consuming initially, but it will save you from going over and over individual parts later. Instead of spending a short time on every subject every night, you might find it more productive to immerse yourself in individual subjects in larger blocks. Try to relate the subject to things you already know, either by asking the instructor to help you see those connections, or by consulting some outside references. Above all, don't lose faith in yourself. You will eventually understand the new material, and once you do your understanding of how it connects to other topics and discipline, it will enable you to apply it in ways that most sequential thinkers may never dream of. As an instructor, consider the use of advanced organizers to help them place new topics in a structure and a sequence. And many textbooks nowadays are offering instructional apparatus that offers the students structure for their lesson. It may be learning objectives at the beginning of a chapter, or it may be an actual outline. But again, consider implementing or using textbooks that have these kinds of apparatus to help the global learner. Well, at the end of this presentation, I hope you will take some time to reflect on the values of diverse learning styles in the higher education classroom. Can you now articulate some of the values that diversity of learning strategies could bring to your own classroom, and how you can take full advantage of that diversity? Acknowledging both active and reflective learners in your classroom will ensure that you employ just the right blend of discussion or problem-solving activities while incorporating time for reflective thinking for other students. Since intuitive learners are easily bored if your learning objectives focus on memorization or rote substitution alone, try to connect your lessons to the real world for the student. Where possible, consider using technology or other tools to involve the sensitive learner with current events and real people. Most students at the college and university level are visual learners. We've already talked about that. So your lecture should be tied to presentations that involve multimedia, stimulating more than just the sense of hearing in the classroom. I'll make a confession to you right now. I'm a sequential teacher. I prefer to organize my materials from general to specific, from simple to complex, from first to last. But as we have learned, not all students are sequential learners. So offering my own students structure and organizational tools will help the global learner not be left behind. Well, there's plenty more to learn about when it comes to learning styles. This short presentation has hopefully whetted your appetite to learn even more about how to foster student learning by offering your audience the widest possible variety of instructional modalities. In our next presentation, we'll look at an entirely different aspect of diversity, cultural diversity, and see how that comes into play in the higher ed classroom.